Good evening. Welcome to Scramble Game Show. In the summer, we try to invite guests to our show because children during the summer usually like to do outdoor activities and their vacations and so on. So we feel they are not interested in doing the indoor games as much as during the regular school year. So today, again, we have our guest. We invited a guest that will tell us something that I think is very informative. As you know, our show, the purpose is to keep residents, families, and kids informed about current event or issues or some topics that it's beneficial. As you know, today, our economy is not doing well, and the job is a big concern, and many kids, particularly high school kids, getting ready to either go to college, some maybe go get jobs, very much concerned about what to do, whether major in some discipline or finding a job they can earn a living. So today we have invited a guest who is by trade of many things, a photographer, an art designer, worked with a national magazine, Newsweek, I'm sure you all know. He has lots of experience, and I felt he could talk to us, particularly to our young people in the audience, about from career point of view, what to do, what to sort of select, particularly in the art world. Okay, as you know, that many people actually attracted to artwork, art design, and nowadays with technology sort of merging with the art, it's kind of not distinguishable whether you are really in technology or art sometimes. So I think it's appropriate to have this topic. And let's welcome our guest. His name is Mr. Ron Meyerson.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you take time to be our guest.
Thank you.
And as you heard what I said, we hope that you, through your discussion and your career, would shed some light to our young people.
Gladly.
About what's ahead in the future.
Yes.
And this would be very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Now, so first let's brief sort of introduction on yourself. Your career. I'm sure that it's very illustrative.
Thank you. Well, it's difficult to be brief because it lasted 50 years.
50
but
years.
Let me begin by saying that I spent most of my career in journalism. Mm-hmm. I was with Newsweek magazine for 21 years.
I see.
But to digress a bit, the last 2 years caught up with me. Technology had come along,
yes. Mm-hmm.
and that became a problem because we would do things on a Sunday that if there was a exciting news event mm-hmm. or a disaster or war broke out mm-hmm. on a Saturday or Sunday, what we did would be transmitted mm-hmm. by satellite mm-hmm. and it would be on the newsstand the next day.
Right.
And it would generally go to publishing houses, mm-hmm. printing plants mm-hmm. all over the world. Mm-hmm. So I decided at that time it was time for another career. Mm-hmm. Before I get to that, may I say that I enjoyed my stay at Newsweek. Mm-hmm. One thing I really appreciated, it gave me a chance to have the pulse on the world. Mm-hmm. I started out briefly with other publications, a golf magazine, a tennis magazine, etc. Mm-hmm. And once I got to Newsweek, I really felt it was an important part of me, my character. Mm-hmm. I was interested in people, I was interested in the world, mm-hmm. and we had a way of conveying this. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the highlights of my career, probably the two most important to me were that I did get to go to 6 presidential conventions.
Wow.
And I really saw,
very impressive.
And I walked the floor, mm-hmm. Throughout all these experiences, and sometimes it could be an 18 to to 20-hour day, but I certainly had access to learning about the whole political process. And secondly, I think probably the second most important and exciting thing for me was that I worked on 32 Watergate stories.
Oh, yes.
And I actually designed 32 Watergate covers. And Newsweek being owned by the Washington Post, we had the privilege of finding things out a lot earlier than anybody else, digesting it. We were able to make an assessment of it.
Right.
And I found investing myself in some of these covers was really exciting because some were generated on Fridays and Saturdays, and this is before the age of Photoshop and current technology.
Right. At this point, let me interject something because I know you have brought some artwork and graphics, and we have tried to put into the computer system. This studio is quite modern, and we hope we can show them. Although we probably don't have the manpower to manage like the news show that television.
Fine.
So what I would say now to our director and the assistant up there is that when we talk and if we mention about like Watergate, if the graphics is there, they feel free to pop right up, okay?
Okay, actually, there are 3 Watergate covers that I brought along.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm saying that. So I hope that they have listened to our conversation.
Well, the first one was when the White House secretary had cut off the tapes and eliminated
the
valuable evidence.
Right.
And that was a quick cover. And I had the idea, as an image, to take the White House and use that as a base and put a tape reels on the top.
Right, as the cover for the Newsweek.
That was a cover, a Watergate cover. And that was done hastily. And what I did, I made a quick sketch. And I faxed it down to Washington to our Washington photographer.
Right.
He went up in a helicopter, took the exact angle I wanted.
Wow.
And unfortunately, you don't fly over the White House in a helicopter. And he was forced down by a fighter plane. He was taken into custody. And back to me, if you're out there, I do apologize.
I see.
He was released.
Well, also on that ground, they were legitimate reason for doing that.
Oh, indeed, yes. He went overboard and over the boundary.
Right.
And then I photographed the reels in New York,
the tape,
and we spent all night. It was before the days of Photoshop. We slapped it together, and it did make the cover.
All right, I don't know whether our director and assistant up there found the tape graphics or not. If they did, they could show that anytime.
I have it here.
Well, why don't we flip this picture on everything.
I have them here. Bear with me. I'm sorry. And that is our White House cover.
Okay, let's see whether can we zoom in on this picture, John? Yes. Say that is the famous tape, okay? And of course, cut off the tape and is trying to hide the conversation.
Well, I'm also very proud of that cover because the American Society of Magazine Editors selected it as one of the 40 best covers ever designed in America.
Very good, very good. Now, on this, let's hold the others for a while, is that when you do this design covers on, it requires creativity.
Yes.
And I wanted our audience to appreciate this. When you select a career you want to do, intrinsically has to have that creativity element in it, right?
Yes, but one of the things I was going to discuss a little later, my advice to give students, and one of the other highlights I had at Newsweek is I set aside 1 lunch hour a week to counsel students.
Great.
And I had students come from as far away as Philadelphia and Rochester on a regular basis. And
this is great because nowadays we have in high school, for example, so-called mentor program, and try to. Our problem actually is finding willing mentors, okay? Because people are very busy in the company, and then they just don't have the time to devote it to this kind of.
Well, I still try and do the same thing. I really do, with not just youngsters but with seniors.
Yeah.
And the thing I told youngsters in those days, and it's changed a little now, is to learn their trade. To go to if they're going to an art school, learn the basics. Now, when I went to art school during the summer, what I did was I got a job in a printing plant. Another summer, I got a job in
like internship.
Well, yes, but it really was just an education. I got a job in a paint factory to learn color, etc.
Right.
And to expand themselves to the world around them, and to learn the mechanics of their trade. And today what I do, because when I was learning the foundations of doing artwork professionally, I just had to work with a T-square, a triangle, a ruler, and a drawing table, and I could learn that in a day. Kids today have a real problem because they've got to master the general software we apply to creativity today. There's Adobe Illustrator, there's Adobe InDesign, Quark, Adobe Photoshop, and they're very difficult to learn. Kids sometimes think they just want to go out and design. They don't want those fundamentals.
I think, yeah, certainly the technology has advanced and they make the tools more sophisticated. But I don't know whether they are harder to learn, because I think for today's kids, judging on the fact that they play the games and do these things, actually it's not difficult for them.
It's not as difficult.
And
Very
really,
true.
I think it's the attitude. In many instances, I think today's kids somehow are guided in the wrong direction. Certainly, we think sports is good, but there's a little too much overemphasis of sports.
I totally agree.
I've seen kids that from Monday to Friday, so many days are onto sports, and they travel all over the place to play a little game. I mean, fine, that sports is nice, but time-wise, they spend so much.
Yes.
And compared to say, well, how about pick up music, art, or other things, or crafts things? Because I think these kind of skills, as you say, it also requires time and experience. You have to have that kind of work experience and to know whether this is what you like. And if you don't, you are limiting yourself to, when you get to college, sometimes the kids don't know what to do.
It's difficult.
Right?
It really is.
Yeah.
I find now, even in counseling young people, I taught graphics for the computer and photography at Westchester Community College.
Right. Yeah.
And basically what I try to instill in them is creativity.
Right.
And I give seminars now and I teach classes. And what I try to do is begin with creativity as a factor. And a lot of people don't have the patience for it. But basically, the understanding of creativity is best defined by Pablo Picasso. Picasso said, all creativity is seeing things differently than anybody else. And when I try to express to kids and adults that I get involved with is look at the world around you. There's creativity all around you. Whatever you undertake, use your mind to do it like nobody else has ever done it.
Yeah.
I have a photo show right now in a photo gallery at Heritage Hills.
Right, I see that.
And people ask me about that, and when I tell my students, if you're going to take a photograph, say to yourself, how can I do that like nobody's ever done that?
Right. Well, let's have another picture and see whether, we
Well,
can
this was
follow
a
it
difficult one for me.
Uh-huh.
When the White House tapes arose.
Let's focus on this one on camera one. Okay. I think the audience could recognize the sketch here, right? Is our famous president.
Yes, and the difficulty was I had done a number of Watergate covers everybody had done then. And as we went down the pike, you had to find a new way of presenting it.
Right.
So I had the kooky idea of taking the tapes and doing that portrait, which took me an entire day.
Yeah, the outline is made by tape, right?
Exactly.
This is very interesting. And this is creativity.
Yes, and what I did, because I think that any art student, as young as they are, have to start going to museums. They have to start
libraries.
Libraries. They have to find out how different generations, different civilizations undertook the art experience. And I use my brain to think back for a third Watergate cover. I don't have an example of it, but I can describe it.
Good, go ahead.
in Greek mythology, there was somebody named Laocoon. Laocoon and his two sons were punished for an evil deed. And there is a statue done a very long time ago of Laocoon and his two sons ensnarled in a snake.
Huh.
And I represented the Laocoon statue with Nixon as Laocoon, Haldeman and Ehrlichman.
Two sons.
Two sons, but it wasn't enwrapped in a snake. They were enwrapped in the White House tapes.
Tape. Okay.
Now, there's an amusing story to that.
Yeah.
That Laocoon, of course, is in the buff, as most statues were done in Greek civilization. And I got a letter from John Wayne complaining about the cover.
Really?
And
What was
his only response was, his beef was, I showed the President of the United States naked.
I see. Okay, that's yeah.
He had a point there. But through my career, I got letters from a lot of people.
You're right. Right.
There
That's
were so many others I did.
Yeah.
But again, what I try and press upon them is, you know, the media today is very limited for graphics, etc. That if you go back, go to museums, see what was done, because sometimes indirectly, if you see a Rembrandt painting,
Yeah.
and you see the way light fell on that painting, when you go to take a photograph, you might consider that composition.
Right.
So that's a foundation like that, as well as the current software.
That the foundation doesn't change. Maybe the technology elevated the art from, say, 2-dimension to 3-dimension,
Yes.
and from static to dynamic. You know, that's how video and images sort of changes. But I think the foundation, you know,
It's the
is
same.
the same. And I think today, whether it's in television advertisement or in magazine design or movie, I think still use a lot of the fundamental principles as people dealt with 50 years ago as art.
Oh, even further back, if you really analyze it. And when I teach, basically, my feelings are we do live, in spite of television, no offense, in spite of the printed media, we live in a very visual society,
Right.
a very creative society. And with the invention of the digital camera and the introduction for the computer at home, people are becoming more aware of creativity. They're having a creative experience. They no longer just want to look at a painting. They no longer just want to look at a good or great photograph. They want to do great photographs. They want to do great pictures.
Yeah.
They're getting more involved in creativity.
Right.
And some of the software, as I mentioned, such as Adobe Illustrator, gives them the opportunity to create great artwork, etc.
Oh, yeah.
And again, you don't have to have an art background, but for students, I emphasize the fact there are a lot of fundamentals. Now, during the 17th and 18th century, typography became an art in America. There were great type designers who developed a great collection of types, faces, fonts they're called
to
today.
make graphics, yeah.
Well, to express the written word. And today, it's very important, and a lot of students are reluctant to learn these things and the purpose of them because it's a means of confession,
Yes, yes.
of expression. So I tell them to learn that. Now, I have 200 typefaces in my computer. I know every one.
Well,
of course,
and
I've been dealing with it for years, but I tell students, understand the Gothic typefaces, the modern typefaces, and if you're applying them, just have the awareness that what typefaces are best for what you're expressing.
Yeah, I remember in a computer science course when I was a university professor, the kids, even as a computer major, actually could, apply this kind of a art creativity. They called, this your typeface design.
Yes.
Actually, it's called, in the computer, is a bitmap representation of the image.
Yes.
And the resolution is defined by technology. You may have 64 by 64 or 128 by 128, whatever. If you use those bits and you actually painstakingly pick and shape them, so you would design your font.
Yes.
Okay? So you could have your title font uniquely defined by yourself.
Really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
Yes, I mean the image basically is bits. So you can turn on and off these bits, and you can even apply grayscale if you want to, so that you can have your artistic, letters designed that way, and then show it as an image. So that's why when you say type, actually I immediately thought it was graphics, because it's not a typewriter type of type in the sense of physical object.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, let's see another picture. I know
I'm getting away from Watergate now with just a fun cover. Now.
Oh yes. Okay. This is Buried Alive. Let's focus on this one.
This was a story about the environment and garbage.
Right.
And inside it actually dwelled.
And interesting is this year is 1989.
Correct.
Right. And today probably you can use this cover.
It's an environmental issue
right now.
And it still is.
Right.
But the humor behind this was I had a 12-foot model made of the United States. And we set it up in a studio.
You use physical object to pile up?
Well, we sent out 3 assistants to go out and gather garbage from around New York City, which wasn't difficult, and then we plastered it on there. And if you look closely, our lunch, our pizza is on there, and one of my sneakers is on there. But there was a problem we encountered I didn't realize, that garbage smells. And as we ate our lunch, my photographer was getting sick. And he had to take a little recess, which delayed the shooting.
That's very interesting.
Fortunately, it was not a rush cover.
Yeah.
Well,
I remember during this is in '89,
yes.
During those times, the real estate industry sometimes, develop things right over the so-called garbage pile,
yes.
right? They just put a little bit dirt on top and hide all the garbage and build houses, and it's like those Lego houses, hundreds of them, and all look pretty nice, new. Then after you move in, a year later, for some reason, it doesn't smell.
I know.
And that all the garbage underneath started, putting out these kind of.
Well, I have problems with a lot of environmental stories. I did another one about gasoline and the environment and emissions, etc.
Right.
And we did a cover, and for some reason, the editors wanted to show an Arab in New York with a New York skyline pumping gas. And he was the culprit. But I could not find a model that looked sufficient enough for the editors to approve. I even sent some people down to Brooklyn. Brooklyn Heights at that time had many Arab restaurants. They took Polaroids. They wouldn't like it. And a man walked in one day and said, well, I do. I took a Polaroid. I ran down to the editors, came up, and he said, there's one problem. I'm Jewish. So I ran back downstairs to see the editors, and Lester Bernstein, my editor, said, a Jew on the cover? What else could I ask for? And we did it. However, during that period, there was a woman on television named Rona Barrett, who she was probably one of the first of the 7 o'clock shows. And Rona Barrett that next night announced, ha, 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 Newsweek puts an Arab on the cover, a Jew on the Jewish person as an Arab, and the whole nation knew about it.
Oh, it's a fake.
Management wasn't upset. And this is another cover I wanted to show you, because I had done many. I had a friend who wrote
Making School Better. That's a very
I had a good friend and fellow editor
topic right now.
who was a writer, Larry Martz, used to do a lot of educational books, and I did his designs pro bono.
Larry Martz. Well, this type of work, and today, of course, when you go to elementary school, kids, doodle and draw and so on. All of those elemental, work really can lead to something.
It does.
Yeah, even though as technology advances, profession, does change, but I think the kids today forget. They sometimes don't realize or take things for granted. They are in a better world now.
Oh,
they have more opportunity
Yes.
to pursue, professional, sort of career as photography or art design and so on.
Yes.
I mean, today how many people can now snap a picture, capture an event, and send to Newsweek or Time magazine?
Yes.
And they may just use it because you are at the right place, the right time.
Exactly.
What it takes is a person who is intelligent, who's has the creativity or how to frame the
Yes.
event. That's all it takes.
Yeah.
So I think we should advise the kids today is, don't just sit in a room and play
Yes.
these little things on the TV. Take your camera, take your iPod, take your iPhone, snap things. Be observant
Exactly.
of the world.
And if I could just digress, when the Kent State massacre occurred, there were no photographers from any place, correct?
Around, yeah.
But we called drugstores in the area
Oh,
and said, has anybody brought in film today?
develop, yeah.
And would you believe it, our cover picture came from somebody who had submitted a roll of film, the drugstore had it developed, and that's where we got our image from, because people in those days were aware of events. And you can go all around New York City and see the most exciting images all around you. And matter of fact,
Yeah.
I have something here. I talk about creativity, seeing things differently than anybody else. That's an image I was asked to photograph the
Empire
Waldorf
State
Astoria.
Award.
And I looked around me as I tell kids to look around me. How can that be done differently? And that's what I did. It's a reflection in a window, but
Right,
there
right.
are images all around us.
Yes, this probably hard to see through the TV camera, but I can see very well this reflection
Yeah.
in image within the image. Very good. Well, we don't have much time left. We
Okay.
had a very pleasant conversation. Time just flew. I would like to sort of ask you to summarize a bit, a few tidbits. If kids want to be in the art design world or photography world, what things you would advise them?
One thing I'd like to suggest, if you're in a high school and you want to go on to an art school, that you go to a school like Parsons School of Design in New York, not because I went there, but it's affiliated with a university, and you can finally get a degree when you're done if you choose to. And I think in a sense, you can't only rely on the art world. I think also, as I said, you have a fundamental idea of the history of art, what's been done through the years, be aware of things like composition, you have to be aware of software, many things, but most of all, you have to constantly look around you, and as I said, my motto and Picasso's motto,
Right.
look at things like nobody else looks at things, and utilize that principle in your design, in your photography.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming to
My
our
pleasure.
show. And I hope this is helpful to our kids.
I hope so.
All right, and time just went. We have to close the show
Thank
now.
you.
Let me say a few words to our audience. I hope you enjoyed this interview. And I know many kids in our community, they are somewhat artistic, but don't know what to do with their art skills and creativity. So we are trying to inspire you to think big, think career, think professionalism, and keep your eyes open. Always, put your mind to work. Thank you for watching. But today, we will play this Scramble Bingo, which is also a 5x5 card, okay, which later on we'll show you on the screen. Now, the 5-5 card is 25 cells. Now, we will assign the cells with vowels. How do you do that? We put A, E, I, O, U along the diagonal, any way you want, okay? And on the card, there's 2 diagonal, one way this way, one that way. So there are permutations. You can put A, E, I, O, U, or A, O, E, I, U, whatever way, choose and print cards and so on. And that card is your bingo card, a Scramble Bingo. Now, how do you play the Scramble Bingo? We use letters instead of numbers. Letters come up. Let's say, everybody is probably familiar with the Scramble cards. When the letter comes up, let's say on the board, okay? That doesn't make a word. We will make a rule. Depending on the age of the players, we say, okay, minimum a 3-letter word, or a 4-letter word, or 5-letter word. We can decide that.